William Williams pressed his forehead against the kitchen window of his childhood home, watching his sister, Emma, arrange her collection of Labubu dolls on the backyard picnic table. The pink and yellow creatures sat in perfect rows, their rabbit-like ears drooping in the afternoon heat. At 28, she still played with toys like a child. But after the accident that had left her with the mental capacity of a 10-year-old, William couldn't bring himself to take away the few things that made her smile. The medical bills had been crushing him for 3 years now. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, medication, specialized care. Every month brought new expenses that his insurance found creative ways to deny. His credit cards were maxed out, his savings depleted, and the mortgage company had sent their final notice last week. He'd lost his job at the engineering firm 6 months ago when the stress became too much, and he'd snapped at a client, calling their structural concerns paranoid nonsense. Now, he survived on unemployment and odd jobs, neither of which covered Emma's needs. Their mother emerged from the house carrying a glass of lemonade, her graying hair pulled back in a loose bun. She'd moved in after Emma's accident to help with care, but her arthritis made it difficult to lift Emma when she fell, and her social security barely covered groceries. "The Ramirez girl is coming over later to play with Emma," his mother said, settling into a chair beside him. "She's been asking about those dolls for weeks." William nodded absently. The Labubu dolls had been Emma's obsession since her accident. She'd seen them in a toy store window during a rare outing, and something about their droopy ears and vacant expressions had captivated her. He'd bought her the first one with money he should have used for groceries, and somehow she'd accumulated dozens more through birthday gifts and his own guilty purchases. "Will," his mother's voice carried a strange tension. "I need to tell you something about those dolls." He turned to look at her. She was staring out at Emma, who was now arranging the dolls in a circle, whispering to each one. "My grandmother used to tell stories about dolls like those. She called them vessels." His mother's fingers worked nervously at the hem of her shirt. She said certain objects could hold memories, especially traumatic ones, that they could absorb the pain and fear from their surroundings. "Mom, they're just toys. Listen to me." Her grip on his arm was surprisingly strong. "My grandmother lived through things you can't imagine. She knew about objects that retained the emotions poured into them. She said they became dangerous when they held too much trauma, that they could start reflecting it back." William pulled away gently. His mother had always been superstitious, but the stress of caring for Emma was clearly affecting her judgment. "I'll go check on her." Outside, Emma looked up as he approached, her face lighting up with the same innocent joy she'd had as a child. The accident hadn't taken that away, at least. "William, look, I made them a circle so they can all see each other. Aren't they happy?" The dolls stared back with their black button eyes, mouths frozen in slight smiles. There were 32 of them now, he realized. When had she gotten so many? "They're very nice, Em, but it's getting hot out here. Maybe you should bring them inside." "But they like the sun. They told me so." William felt his stomach clench. Emma often spoke as if the dolls were alive, which her therapist had assured him was normal for someone with her condition. Still, something about the way she said it made him uncomfortable. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed with 3 of her favorite dolls, William sat in the living room, trying to make sense of the bills scattered across the coffee table. The numbers didn't add up no matter how he arranged them. Emma's next therapy session would cost $400, and he had $63 in his checking account. A soft giggling drifted down from upstairs. William smiled despite his anxiety. Even after everything, Emma still found reasons to laugh. The sound reminded him of when they were children, before their father left, before their world became a series of financial catastrophes and medical emergencies. The giggling stopped, replaced by Emma's voice having a conversation with someone. "No, that's not right," she was saying. "William wouldn't do that." Silence then. "But you said he took the money from my special jar." William's blood chilled. Emma kept her allowance money in a ceramic jar shaped like a cat. Last month, when the electricity bill was due and he had no other options, he'd borrowed $20 from it. He'd planned to replace it, but he never found the chance. More importantly, he'd never told anyone about taking it. He climbed the stairs quietly, pausing outside Emma's door. She was still talking, but he could only hear her side of the conversation. He wouldn't lie to Mama about looking for jobs. William always tells the truth. But William had lied. Just yesterday, when their mother asked about his job search, he'd invented interviews that never happened because he was too ashamed to admit he'd stopped trying weeks ago. "Stop saying those things." Emma's voice carried a note of distress he rarely heard from her. "You're being mean." William pushed the door open. Emma sat cross-legged on her bed, facing 3 Labubu dolls arranged in a semicircle. Her face was flushed, and her hands were clenched in her lap. "Em, who are you talking to?" She looked up, relief flooding her features. "William, please tell them they're wrong. They keep saying bad things about you." "Tell who, sweetheart?" "My friends." She gestured to the dolls. "But they're not acting like friends tonight. They're saying you did things you didn't do." William's mouth felt dry. "What kinds of things?" "They said you took money from my jar, and that you lied about going to job interviews, and..." Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. "They said you think about giving me away sometimes." The room seemed to tilt. He had thought about it during the darkest moments when the bills piled up and Emma's needs felt overwhelming, when he wondered if she wouldn't be better off in a state facility where trained professionals could care for her. He'd never spoken those thoughts aloud, had barely admitted them to himself. "Emma, dolls can't talk. You know that, right?" Her face crumpled. "But I heard them, William. I really did." He sat on the edge of her bed, careful not to disturb the dolls. "Sometimes our imagination makes us think we hear things that aren't really there. It's okay. It happens to everyone. But they knew things I don't know. How could I imagine things I don't know?" William had no answer for that. He helped Emma get ready for sleep, then took the 3 dolls downstairs, telling her they needed to rest with their friends. In the living room, he placed them on the mantel next to several others. Their button eyes seemed to follow him as he moved around the room, but that was just the way they were positioned, the way the light hit them. Dolls couldn't actually watch people. His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "We know what you did to get the job at Morrison Engineering." William's hands shook as he stared at the screen. Morrison Engineering was where he'd worked until 6 months ago. The job he'd gotten by lying about his qualifications claiming experience he didn't have, forging a recommendation letter from a previous supervisor who died in a car accident. No one knew about that except him. He deleted the text and tried to forget about it, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw those button eyes staring at him from the mantel. The next morning brought more texts from different unknown numbers. Your sister's accident wasn't your fault, but you still blame yourself. You've been stealing from your mother's purse. You haven't been taking your anxiety medication because you sold it. Each message contained information that only William knew. Secrets he'd never shared with anyone. The anxiety medication one made him physically sick. He had sold his prescription to a guy at a bar, using the money to buy groceries. He told himself it was temporary, that he'd get more when things improved. His mother found him in the kitchen, staring at his phone with trembling hands. What's wrong? Someone's been sending me messages about personal things. He showed her the texts, watching her face pale as she read. William, I told you yesterday. My grandmother warned about objects like this. They don't just hold memories, they can use them. Mom, that's impossible. Is it? How else would someone know these things? Before he could answer, Emma ran into the kitchen, her face bright with excitement. William, my friends want to show you something special today. They said they have a surprise for you. The dolls were waiting in the living room, arranged in a perfect circle on the coffee table. Emma clapped her hands and sat in the center of the circle, patting the floor beside her. Sit with me. They want to tell you something. William reluctantly sat down, feeling foolish. The dolls stared at him with their fixed expressions, innocent and somehow malevolent at the same time. What do they want to tell me, Em? Emma closed her eyes and tilted her head as if listening. They say they've been collecting your secrets, keeping them safe. But they're getting full, and they need to make room for new ones. What does that mean? They want to share them with everyone. William's phone rang. The caller ID showed his former supervisor at Morrison Engineering. William? This is Janet. I need to ask you about something. I just received a very strange email about your employment history with us. His blood turned to ice. What kind of email? Someone claiming to have proof that you falsified your credentials. Normally, I'd ignore something like this, but they included specific details about the Henderson project that only someone with inside knowledge would know. William hung up without responding. His phone immediately began buzzing with more calls, more texts, more messages from unknown numbers revealing his deepest shames. The dolls are angry, Emma said, still sitting in their circle. They don't like keeping secrets anymore. They want everyone to know. Over the next hour, William's phone exploded with messages. His mother's church friends received detailed accounts of the money he'd stolen from the collection plate during Emma's surgery. His former co-workers learned about the time he'd blamed his mistakes on a junior engineer. Neighbors got messages about his unpaid bills, his lies, his moments of despair when he'd wished Emma had died in the accident instead of just being injured. Make it stop, he begged Emma, but she was rocking back and forth in the circle of dolls, her eyes closed, tears streaming down her face. They won't listen to me anymore, she sobbed. They're too angry. They say you put too much sadness and fear into them, and now they're full of it. They want to give it back. The house phone rang, then his phone, then their mother's phone. The sounds overlapped into a cacophony of electronic shrieking. The dolls sat silent in their circle, but William could swear he heard whispers coming from them. Dozens of tiny voices reciting his secrets in unison. His mother appeared in the doorway, her face white. "The Hendersons just called. They received a message claiming you've been stealing from them when you mow their lawn." "I have been," William whispered. "I take $20 from the jar where they keep the payment." "William, no. I've been taking money from everyone, Mom. From Emma, from you, from the church, from neighbors. I've been lying about everything. I'm a fraud and a thief, and those things know it all." Emma opened her eyes, looking at him with a clarity he hadn't seen since before her accident. "The dolls aren't bad, William. They're just holding too much pain. Your pain, it made them sick." She stood up and walked to the mantel where the rest of her collection waited. "My grandmother's stories were right," she continued. And William realized it was their mother speaking through Emma's voice, drawing on memories that the accident hadn't fully erased. Objects can hold trauma, but they were never meant to hold so much. How do we stop it? "We give them what they need," Emma said, her voice switching back to her childlike tone. "They need the pain to go away." William looked at the dolls, at his sister, at his mother, watching from the doorway. All around him, phones continued to ring with calls from people who now knew his deepest shames. "What if I deserve this? What if everyone should know what I've done?" "Maybe they should," his mother said gently. "But not like this. Not from objects twisted by trauma." Emma picked up one of the dolls from the mantel. "They're so heavy now," she said, full of hurt. William reached into his wallet and pulled out the $20 he'd taken from the Hendersons' payment jar the day before. He placed it on the coffee table in the center of the doll circle. "I stole this," he said aloud. "I've been stealing from everyone because I'm scared and desperate, and I don't know how to take care of my family." The whispers from the dolls grew louder, but they sounded less angry now, more like wind through leaves. Emma smiled and placed her doll next to the money. "Tell them about the other things too." So William did. He confessed every theft, every lie, every moment of weakness and despair. He spoke about his fear of losing Emma, his guilt over her accident, his terror that he wasn't strong enough to be the man his family needed. With each confession, Emma added another doll to the pile on the coffee table. The whispers gradually faded, replaced by a strange sense of lightness in the room. When all the dolls were gathered together, William's mother brought him a cardboard box. "It's time to let them go," she said. They packed the dolls carefully, Emma kissing each one goodbye and thanking them for keeping William's secrets safe. The phones had stopped ringing. The oppressive weight that had filled the house for days was lifting. William drove the box to the town dump and watched as it disappeared into the flames of the incinerator. He felt hollow but clean, like an infected wound that had finally been drained. The next morning brought consequences. Angry calls from people he'd wronged, demands for repayment, threats of legal action. But it also brought something unexpected. Offers of help from neighbors who understood his desperation, recommendations for social services that could assist with Emma's care, and a strange sense of freedom that came from having no more secrets to hide. Emma adapted to life without her dolls with surprising resilience, though she sometimes spoke wistfully about her friends who held too much sadness. she started playing with puzzles instead, her fingers working patiently to fit the pieces together. Months later, William found steady work with a construction company whose owner had been impressed by his honesty about his situation. The pay wasn't great, but it was honest work, and William discovered that sleeping without secrets was worth more than he'd ever imagined. Sometimes, walking through toy stores, he would see Labubu dolls on the shelves and feel a chill of recognition. Their button eyes seemed to watch him, waiting patiently to absorb whatever pain and fear their next owner might need them to hold. He always walked past them quickly, remembering Emma's words about objects that become too full of hurt. Some burdens, he'd learned, were meant to be shared with people, not hidden away in silent vessels that could only whisper them back in the dark. The house felt different now, lighter somehow, despite the ongoing financial struggles. Emma laughed more freely. Their mother's arthritis seemed less painful, and William discovered that facing his flaws directly was less terrifying than trying to hide them. But he never forgot the lesson of the dolls, or the sound of 32 tiny voices reciting his secrets in perfect, merciless harmony. Some truths, once spoken by the wrong voices, could never be unheard. On quiet nights, when the house settled into sleep around him, William sometimes thought he could still hear whispers from the dump where the dolls had burned. Not angry whispers now, but grateful ones. The sound of objects finally released from the weight of too much human pain. He slept better, knowing they were gone. But he never forgot the price of filling innocent things with secrets too heavy for them to bear.